So here we're going to demonstrate the proper technique for recrystallization. And so what I've done here is I've started by measuring out some benzoic acid. And benzoic acid can, in general, be recrystallized from water. So I'm going to add a small amount of water here, just enough to cover up the crystals. And as you can see when we hold this up, benzoic acid is basically insoluble in water. And so that's the first property that we look for in a recrystallization solvent, is that at room temperature and at low temperature, the solute should be insoluble. Now we're going to start heating it up, because it turns out that benzoic acid is actually very soluble in boiling water. You'll notice I've set my temperature on the hot plate somewhere above the boiling point of water, and then I've pressed the button to turn the heating on. I've got my temperature probe in the water, and now it's just a matter of waiting for this to boil. Now what we will do while we're waiting is, when it gets to its boiling point and the water starts to boil, at that point we will either see all of the benzoic acid dissolve and we're ready to move on, or we'll see that it's still not fully dissolved and we'll need to add some additional water. Now we can see here our water is heating up already. And if we look closely at our solution, we can see that a fair amount of the benzoic acid has already dissolved. So our solution is now up to about 90 degrees, so we're nearing the boiling point. And we can see that while some of it's dissolved, clearly it's not even close to all dissolving. So I'm going to add some additional water to that. And we'll need to let it continue now to heat, because by adding the colder water, we've cooled down the temperature of the solution. Now, one thing that you can do to help with that is that I could take some of that water and instead leave that to heat on the hot plate. So while we can see that a large percentage of our benzoic acid has now dissolved, there's still some that remains out of solution, and given that we were at our boiling point, we've added some additional hot water to help dissolve that. We want to continue this process until all of our benzoic acid has dissolved. Finally, you can see down at the bottom that virtually all of our benzoic acid has dissolved. So we should just need to wait another moment or two as this heats back up, and we should see that everything has gone into solution. So finally we see that all of our benzoic acid has dissolved, and we're ready to start our crystallization. In order to do that, we need to first cool our solution down to room temperature. Now, depending on our recrystallization, sometimes we will see crystallization start to occur just at room temperature, and sometimes it will require an ice bath. Regardless, we will cool the solution in an ice bath after it has come to room temperature. But we can see already, even just in less than a minute, some of our benzoic acid has already started to crystallize out. So while we're waiting for that, we'll set up for our filtration. For our filtration, we need a filter flask such as this one. It's an Erlenmeyer with a sidearm so that we can pull a vacuum. We'll need our funnel, and then this adapter so that we have a seal. Finally, we need a small piece of filter paper that fits snugly into the funnel. And then we'll need a piece of tubing to connect this to the vacuum. So our vacuum is our yellow over here. We have one on each side. Connect the tubing to the vacuum, and then to the side arm of the flask. And we can see now that we have a significant amount of crystallization occurring. And in order to complete that crystallization, we'll place the solution in an ice bath. Now, when you're doing this, you want to make sure that before you put the solution in an ice bath, that you've let it cool fully to room temperature. And then once you've placed it in the ice bath, you want to leave it there for approximately 10 minutes. Now, I don't really think anyone watching this video wants to sit here and stare at our flask in an ice bath, so we're just going to skip ahead. We're going to turn our vacuum on all the way. And then we know that our vacuum is running because we should see it pulling liquid through there very quickly. We always wet the filter paper first. And then I'm going to take our solution and filter it through. And you can see it's pulled the water through very quickly. and we have our pure benzoic acid in the funnel. Now, there's still a lot left behind here. And so two ways that I can try and get it out. One is, and the better way, is to get as much out with a spatula as possible. The other thing that we could do is, if we have some cold water, or whatever the solvent is we've used, which is in this case water, we could rinse with a small amount of cold water and help to bring that rest of that solution over as well. But you want to make sure that if you use any extra solvent to wash, that solvent is cold. Otherwise, you can run into the problem of redissolving your crystals. But now that our filtration is done, you can see our pure benzoic acid crystals are collected here in our funnel. At this point, we could do any analysis that we wanted to on them, such as melting point or IR, but only after we've given them an appropriate period of time to dry.